dum, dum, dum.
Around, go home, and go back to bed. Very funny.
What happens when childhood magic doesn't just fade, but completely falls apart the second you press play again? Some cartoons don't age, they fossilize. And the 1960s were full of them. Loud colors, cheap motion, big promises, tiny budgets. Half a century later, the charm is gone, the pacing hurts, and the silence between jokes feels endless. Somewhere in this countdown is the moment Saturday morning stopped being fun and started feeling like homework. Number 18. The Alvin Show, 1961. This one hurts to admit, because the brand survived, the characters survived, the voices still echo in pop culture. But the original cartoon itself is nearly unwatchable now. The Alvin Show arrived in 1961 as a novelty built around sound. High voices, fast talking, and songs designed to stick whether you liked them or not. At the time, that was enough. Television was new, animation budgets were thin, energy mattered more than structure. Watching it now feels like being trapped in a room where someone keeps tapping a glass. The animation barely moves. Characters slide instead of walk. Mouths flap without emotion. Entire scenes feel frozen except for one bouncing eyebrow. The pacing is the real problem. Jokes never stop long enough to land. Everything rushes forward while still somehow feeling slow. Alvin shouts, Simon explains, Theodore reacts, repeat, no escalation, no arc, just noise. Even the songs feel misplaced. They interrupt stories instead of building them. You can almost feel the show killing time. It's not shocking, it's worse, it's exhausting. And a reminder that animation was once treated like filler instead of storytelling. Number 17. Calvin and the Colonel, 1961. This one didn't just age poorly, it collapsed under its own weight. Calvin and the Colonel premiered in 1961 with a strange plan. Take an old radio comedy style, animate it, keep the accents, keep the jokes, change almost nothing. That decision locked its fate. The animation is basic even by 60s standards. Characters stand still and talk. Long stretches of dialogue play out with barely a blink. Motion is rare. When it happens, it feels accidental. But the real issue is tone. The humor relies on exaggerated speech patterns that feel deeply dated now. What once passed as character now sounds like a routine that doesn't know when to stop. The show assumes you're already in on the joke. There's no setup. No invitation. You're dropped into conversations that feel half-finished and oddly slow. Saturday morning cartoons were supposed to feel alive. This one feels like listening to someone else's inside joke while sitting on a hard floor. Watching it now, you can see television learning what not to do. Animation alone doesn't make something fresh. Movement matters. Tone matters. Audience matters. This show never adapted. And without evolution, animation doesn't age. It withers. Number 16. The New Casper Cartoon Show, 1963. Casper was supposed to be gentle, friendly, soft. That was the brand. And in short bursts, it worked. But stretched into full episodes, the energy disappears. But the New Casper Cartoon Show launched in 1963 by recycling a character already worn thin. Casper tries to be nice. Others misunderstand. A mild problem appears. It gently dissolves. Roll credits. Watching it now feels like staring at fog. The animation barely moves. Characters float more than walk. Expressions change only when required. Backgrounds repeat so often they feel familiar. Scenes linger too long, as if afraid to cut. The biggest issue is conflict, or the lack of it. Nothing feels urgent, nothing feels risky. You always know how it ends because the show refuses to surprise you. Modern animation expects momentum. Even slow stories move emotionally. Casper doesn't move at all. It stalls. Conversations drag. Pauses stretch into silence. Casper isn't unwatchable because it's bad. It's unwatchable because it's empty. As when nostalgia fades, all that's left is a very quiet show that forgot Saturday mornings were meant to wake you up. Number 15. The Jetsons, 1962. This one surprises people because it's iconic. The look, the future jokes, everyone remembers it. Few sit through full episodes anymore. When the Jetsons premiered in 1962, it felt bold. A space-age family sitcom. Bright colors, flying cars, the future imagined by people who had never used a computer. Rewatch it now, and the pacing hurts. Scenes stretch far too long. Conversations pause awkwardly. Reaction shots linger like the show expects applause that never comes. The humor repeats one idea endlessly. Technology is annoying. Machines talk back. Buttons don't work. Different gadget, same punchline. The animation doesn't help. Characters glide. Rooms feel frozen. When something moves, it feels mechanical. George Jetson himself hasn't aged well. Nervous, complaining, overwhelmed by everything. What once felt relatable now feels grating. The Jetsons works as an image, a reference, a theme song, but as long viewing, it drags. The future looked shiny. The storytelling didn't evolve. Number 14. The Abbott and Costello Cartoon Show, 1967. This show was already late when it arrived. The Abbott and Costello Cartoon Show premiered in 1967, long after the duo had peaked. The idea was simple. Animate the routines. Introduce them to kids. The problem is the routines were never meant for this format. Their comedy relied on timing and physical presence. Animation drains both. Jokes stretch too long. Pauses feel awkward. Lines repeat without escalation. The animation is stiff even for its time. Characters stand and talk. Movement is minimal. Falls lack weight. The energy of live performance is gone. Episodes recycle famous bits with small changes. The same misunderstandings. The same rhythms. Over and over. For kids, it was confusing. For adults, it was thin. The show lived in an awkward middle space. Watching it now feels like a museum exhibit. You're told it was funny once, but you're not allowed to feel it. Abbott and Costello remain legends. Their animated versions do not. This series proves that comedy without its performers doesn't age. It flattens. Number 13. King Leonardo and His Short Subjects, 1960. This show feels like it was built out of leftovers, because it basically was. And King Leonardo and His Short Subjects premiered in 1960, right at the start of the decade, and you can feel television figuring things out in real time. The animation is thin, the pacing is loose, the humor feels assembled rather than written. The premise sounds charming on paper. A well-meaning lion ruler, a chaotic court, a constant threat to the throne. But the execution never commits. Stories wander. Jokes drift past without impact. Scenes end before they feel complete. The animation is as minimal as it gets. Characters barely move. Mouths open and close with little emotion behind them. Backgrounds loop endlessly. Entire conversations play out with the cast frozen in place like cardboard cutouts. The biggest issue is focus. The show jumps between segments, side characters, and half-finished ideas. Just when something starts to form, it cuts away. Momentum never builds. Attention never locks in. For kids at the time, this was likely background noise. Something on while cereal got soggy. For modern viewers, that lack of intention becomes impossible to ignore. You're always waiting for the show to decide what it wants to be. Comedy here is soft and distant. No sharp timing. No escalation. Jokes rely on repetition instead of surprise. You can predict every outcome minutes before it arrives. What really dates it is the confidence gap. The show doesn't trust its audience. It over-explains, it stalls, it pads. Modern cartoons move fast because they assume viewers can keep up. This one assumes you might wander off at any moment, and honestly, it's right. King Leonardo isn't aggressively bad. It's worse, it's forgettable. To the kind of show that vanishes from memory even while you're watching it. That might have worked in 1960. It doesn't work now. Today, it plays like a test pattern disguised as a cartoon, a reminder of how much early television relied on filling time rather than earning attention. Number 12. Hoppity Hooper. 1964. Hoppity Hooper feels like a cartoon that's afraid to raise its voice. Premiering in 1964, the show centers on a young frog exploring the world. That's it. No urgency, no real danger, just gentle movement from one mild situation to another. The animation is clean, but lifeless. Characters float instead of walk. Movements are slow and cautious. Expressions rarely change. It feels less like a story unfolding and more like a picture book being read aloud very quietly. Or the pacing is the real challenge. Scenes stretch long past their purpose. Conversations take their time getting nowhere. Every episode feels padded, as if the show is worried about running out of material. Conflict barely exists. Problems are small and solved quickly. There's no tension to pull you forward. You're never curious what happens next, because nothing truly happens. For young children in the 60s, this calm approach may have felt safe. For modern viewers raised on momentum and emotion, it feels sedating, not relaxing. Sedating. What stands out most is how little the show trusts animation as a medium. Everything is told, rarely shown. Narration carries weight that visuals should handle. The result is a cartoon that talks about movement instead of using it. There's also an odd emotional distance. Characters don't grow, or they don't change. They don't remember. Every episode resets completely, leaving no reason to invest. Watching it now feels like being stuck in a waiting room where nothing ever gets called. Pleasant colors, soft sounds, endless delay. Hoppity Hooper isn't offensive. It isn't loud. It isn't chaotic. It's something more difficult to defend. It's dull. And dullness ages faster than controversy. This show didn't fail because it was wrong. It failed because it was timid. And timidity doesn't survive time. Number 11. The Mighty Hercules, 1963. If repetition were a superpower, this show would be unstoppable. The Mighty Hercules debuted in 1963 with an epic title and a very small budget, and you can feel that budget stretching in every single frame. What followed was a cartoon built almost entirely on reuse. Animation repeats, music loops, dialogue patterns recycle, even entire action moments reappear so often you start recognizing them like reruns inside the episode itself. The structure never changes. Hercules faces a challenge. A narrator explains exactly what you are already looking at. The hero flexes. The problem disappears. Reset. Repeat. Once you've seen this cycle once, you've seen it forever. The animation is extremely limited. Characters slide instead of walk. Movements loop endlessly. Action scenes replay the same motions again and again. Within minutes, your brain starts predicting the next frame before it arrives. Narration carries nearly everything. Instead of showing emotion or excitement, the show tells you what to feel. Constantly. That alone makes it feel ancient. A modern animation trusts visuals. This one never stops talking. The tone is stiff and serious, but strangely empty. There's no humor to break the rhythm. No personality beyond basic hero traits. Characters exist to move the plot forward, not to feel real. For kids in the 60s, the mythology angle may have felt impressive. For modern viewers, it feels like homework. Epic in name. Flat in execution. Watching The Mighty Hercules now is like watching the same short clip loop for half an hour. You don't get bored instantly. You slowly lose patience. It's not just unwatchable today. It feels permanently stuck, unable to move forward even when the screen pretends it is. Number 10. The Beanie and Cecil Show, 1962. This one thinks speed can hide everything. It can't. But the Beanie and Cecil Show arrived in 1962, trying to feel clever. Fast talk. Loud voices. Jokes stacked on top of jokes. The show throws words at you like it's afraid silence might expose it. At first it feels energetic, almost refreshing. But then the problem sets in. None of the jokes have time to land. References fly by without setup. Humor depends on you already knowing what it's parodying. For viewers at the time, that felt smart, like being part of a club. For viewers now, it feels exhausting. You're constantly catching up instead of enjoying the moment. The animation doesn't help. Movement is frantic but shallow. Characters bounce and zip, but rarely express anything real. It's motion without weight, noise without meaning. Episodes feel cluttered. Too many ideas, too many characters, too many interruptions. Just when a scene starts to form, something else crashes into it. Momentum doesn't build, it fractures. What really dates the show is its reliance on topical humor. Jokes aimed at the early 60s land flat today. Without context, they feel random. Without nostalgia, they feel empty. The show mistakes chaos for creativity. It assumes fast equals funny. Sometimes it is. Here, it mostly isn't. Rewatching it now feels like scrolling through a feed that never pauses. You're overstimulated but underwhelmed. By the end of an episode, you remember the noise, not the jokes. The Beanie and Cecil show isn't boring. It's worse, it's tiring, and fatigue is the fastest way to lose an audience. Number 9. The Space Kidettes, 1966. This is what happens when a trend gets stretched too thin. And by the time the Space Kidettes premiered in 1966, space was everywhere. Rockets, helmets, aliens. Networks wanted anything that floated. This show tried to ride that wave without adding much of its own. The result is a cartoon full of movement but no gravity. The animation is cluttered. Characters bounce around tiny spaceships. Backgrounds spin, colors flash. But nothing feels grounded. There's no sense of place, just shapes moving through noise. The characters themselves barely register. They exist to fill space, not drive story. Personalities blur together. Dialogue sounds interchangeable. You could swap voices and nothing would change. Pacing is frantic but unfocused. Scenes rush past without purpose. Problems appear and vanish before they feel important. Stakes never rise. Everything feels temporary and disposable. For kids then, the novelty of space might have carried it. For modern viewers, novelty isn't enough. We expect characters to matter, worlds to feel real. Here, everything feels plastic. There's also an odd emotional coldness. No warmth, no connection. The show moves too fast to care about anyone inside it. Watching it now feels like staring at a blinking dashboard with no destination. Lights everywhere. No direction. The Space Kidettes represents the downside of trend chasing. When everyone wants space, someone delivers filler. And filler doesn't age, it evaporates. This show didn't fail loudly, it faded quietly. And today, that quiet emptiness is impossible to ignore. Number 8. The Atom Ant Show, 1965. This cartoon is built on one joke, just one, and it never changes. The Atom Ant Show debuted in 1965 with a simple idea. Tiny hero, big strength, high voice, problem solved. That's the whole formula. At first it's cute, a small character doing big things. But after a few minutes, the repetition sets in. Every episode follows the same rhythm. Setup, threat, transformation, resolution, reset. The animation is basic even by Hanna-style standards. Limited movement, reused shots, predictable action beats. Once you've seen one sequence, you've seen them all. The humor relies almost entirely on contrast. Small versus big. Quiet versus loud. That contrast never evolves. There's no twist, no growth, just repetition. What really hurts the show now is how safe it feels. Nothing challenges the format. Nothing surprises. The show doesn't trust its audience to want more than familiarity. Modern viewers are trained to expect escalation. Even comedy needs variation. Atom Ant refuses to change. It locks itself into a loop and stays there. By the third episode, you're no longer watching. You're waiting for it to end. Not because it's bad, but because it's done everything it can do. Atom Ant works in clips, short bursts, nostalgia compilations. As full episodes, it collapses under its own simplicity. This show proves that a good idea isn't enough. Without evolution, charm turns into monotony, and monotony doesn't survive time. Number 7. The New Adventures of Superman, 1966. This one feels heavy in a way cartoons should never feel. When The New Adventures of Superman arrived in 1966, it carried a lot of weight. A famous hero, a famous symbol, a sense that it needed to behave. And that's exactly the problem. It behaves too much. The animation is stiff, not stylized, not expressive, just stiff. Characters stand upright, deliver lines, then glide away. Action scenes feel restrained, like the show is afraid to move too fast or too freely. Dialogue does most of the work. Long explanations, clear moral statements, everything spelled out, nothing left to interpretation. The show doesn't trust visuals or silence to carry meaning. Superman himself feels distant, calm to the point of boredom. He reacts instead of engages. Problems appear, but they never feel threatening. You always know how things will end, and you always know how long it will take to get there. The pacing is slow, painfully slow. Scenes linger, conversations stretch, reaction shots hang in the air. What should feel heroic instead feels procedural. For kids in the 60s, this version of Superman may have felt reassuring, safe, predictable. For modern viewers, it feels lifeless. Superheroes today are allowed to struggle. This one never does. Even the animation loops become noticeable. Flying sequences repeat. Backgrounds recycle. Movement feels mechanical rather than powerful. Watching it now feels like watching a rulebook come to life. Everything is proper. Everything is correct. And nothing is exciting. This show didn't fail because it misunderstood Superman. It failed because it was afraid of fun, and fear drains the energy out of animation fast. Number 6. Milton the Monster, 1965. Milton the Monster looks like it should work. Bright colors, a friendly design, a gentle tone. But watching it now reveals just how slow a cartoon can be without realizing it. For premiering in 1965, the show centers on Milton, a shy monster in a spooky setting that never actually feels spooky. Everything is soft. Every edge is rounded. Every situation is handled with caution. The animation is clean but minimal. Characters move carefully. Gestures are small. Expressions barely change. Scenes stretch longer than they need to. The pacing is the real issue. Episodes drift. They don't build. They wander from one mild situation to another without urgency. You're never pulled forward. You're gently nudged. Humor here is quiet and polite. Jokes rely on misunderstanding rather than surprise. Nothing escalates. Nothing spins out of control. Everything stays safe. That safety is what dates it. Modern animation understands rhythm. Even calm shows move with purpose. Milton moves like it's afraid of waking someone up. There's also a strange emotional distance. Milton is kind, but passive. Other characters exist to react, not to grow. Episodes reset completely. Nothing carries over. Nothing matters beyond the moment. Watching it now feels like flipping through pages of a book without reading the words. Pleasant images. No grip. Milton the Monster isn't offensive. It isn't chaotic. It isn't loud. It's something harder to defend. It's dull. And dullness doesn't age gracefully. This is a show that survives as an image, a memory, a design. As actual viewing, it fades almost immediately. Number 5. The Magilla Gorilla Show, 1964. Magilla Gorilla has energy, it has color, it has movement. And somehow it still feels repetitive almost instantly. Or when the show debuted in 1964, the concept was simple. A gorilla in a pet shop. No one wants to buy him. Situations repeat. That's the loop. At first it's amusing. Magilla is expressive. The animation has bounce. The characters move more than many of their era. But then you realize the structure never changes. Every episode resets completely. Same setup. Same misunderstandings. Same outcomes. The show doesn't evolve. It circles. The humor leans heavily on repetition. A joke lands once. Then again. Then again. Eventually, you're watching the same episode with slightly different dialogue. The pacing isn't slow, but it isn't sharp either. Scenes move, but without tension. You know exactly where everything is headed within minutes. Magilla himself is charming, but passive. He reacts to events instead of driving them. That limits the story possibilities fast. Modern viewers expect even simple cartoons to build layers. This one refuses. It stays on the surface, bright, loud, flat. Watching it now feels like being stuck in a loop you can't break. Not unpleasant at first, but draining over time. The Magilla Gorilla Show works best as a memory, a clip, a reference. As full episodes, it struggles to justify its runtime. Charm alone isn't enough. And this show proves that repetition, no matter how colorful, eventually wears thin. Number 4. Tennessee Tuxedo and His Tales, 1963. This cartoon feels like it keeps stopping itself. When Tennessee Tuxedo and His Tales premiered in 1963, it aimed to be smart, educational. The goal was to mix comedy with lessons, to pause the action and explain how things worked. On paper, that sounded helpful. On Saturday morning, it broke the rhythm completely. The animation is already limited. Characters move sparingly, walk cycles repeat, expressions barely change. That alone puts pressure on pacing. But the show doubles down by interrupting itself constantly. Just when a story starts to build, everything freezes. A narrator steps in. An explanation begins. Momentum disappears. What should feel playful suddenly feels instructional, like a classroom interrupting recess. For kids back then, this may have felt useful. For modern viewers, it feels like hitting pause every few minutes. There's no flow, no immersion. The story never gets a chance to breathe or surprise you. Tennessee himself is reactive, not active. He stumbles into situations and waits for help. Often that help comes from outside explanation rather than character choice. That removes agency, and without agency, tension fades fast. The humor is gentle but thin. Jokes rely on wordplay and setup rather than surprise. Timing drags. Punchlines arrive late, if they arrive at all. Any laugh that does land is quickly buried under more explanation. What really dates the show is its lack of trust in the audience. It assumes viewers must be told everything, shown nothing. Modern animation moves faster and lets viewers keep up. Tennessee Tuxedo isn't unwatchable because it's wrong. It's unwatchable because it never commits. Comedy or education? Pick one. Trying to do both drains the energy from each. Number 3. The Hillbilly Bears, 1965. Silence can be powerful. But here, it's a problem. The Hillbilly Bears debuted in 1965 as a mostly silent cartoon. The idea was visual comedy, expressions, movement, physical humor. In theory, that should travel across generations easily. In practice, it doesn't. The animation is extremely basic. Movements are slow, actions repeat. Visual gags stretch far longer than they should. Without dialogue to add rhythm, timing becomes everything, and the timing is off. Scenes linger. Too long. Gags wait. Too long. You see the joke coming seconds before it arrives, and then it keeps going after it's already done. Characters are broad to the point of flatness. No growth, no change, no memory. Every episode resets fully. Nothing carries forward. For viewers in the 60s, this simplicity may have felt familiar, like old theatrical shorts. For modern audiences, it feels empty. We're used to characters with personality, even without dialogue. These characters exist only to repeat behavior. The lack of sound design hurts too. Silence dominates. Music loops endlessly. There's no variation to build mood or tension. Watching it now feels like watching someone mime the same routine over and over. You appreciate the effort, but you stop watching. The Hillbilly Bears isn't offensive. It's not shocking. It's just thin. There's no texture, no depth, no reason to stay engaged beyond curiosity. This is a show that survives in still images better than motion. Once it starts moving, its limitations become impossible to ignore. It stands as a reminder that animation needs more than motion. It needs rhythm, and without it, silence becomes weight. Number 2. The Quick Draw McGraw Show, 1960. And this one hits harder on rewatch than people expect. The Quick Draw McGraw Show premiered in 1960 and quickly became popular. A fast-talking hero, a Western setting, broad humor. It worked at the time. But time has not been kind to it. The animation follows the familiar limited style. Reused backgrounds, recycled movements, predictable action beats. That alone wouldn't sink it. Many shows survived that. The issue is tone. Humor here leans heavily on exaggeration that no longer lands the same way. Voices are extreme. Mannerisms are broad. Jokes repeat until they wear thin. Quick Draw himself is loud and confident, but shallow. He charges into situations, repeats catchphrases and resets. There's no evolution, no reflection, no change. Supporting characters exist only to set him up. They don't grow, they don't surprise, they react. The pacing isn't slow, but it's rigid. Every episode follows the same structure. Once you recognize it, the rest becomes automatic. Setup, chase, resolution, reset. Modern viewers expect variation. This show refuses it. Watching it now feels like watching a performance stuck in a loop. Familiar, predictable, draining. What once felt energetic now feels excessive. What once felt playful now feels forced. The Quick Draw McGraw Show didn't age into something worse. It stayed exactly the same while audiences changed around it. And that gap is what makes it hard to sit through today. It's close to the end of this list for a reason, because it almost works. Almost. And that makes its limits even clearer. Number 1. The New Three Stooges, 1965. This is where the countdown had to end. Not because this show is the loudest, or the most chaotic, but because it perfectly represents everything that makes 60s Saturday morning cartoons difficult to revisit now. The New Three Stooges premiered in 1965 with a bold but misguided idea. Blend new live-action segments with animated shorts, keep the famous comedy trio relevant, stretch a familiar act across a new generation. What sounded clever on paper became exhausting on screen. The structure alone is a problem. Episodes bounce between formats without rhythm. Live-action bits feel disconnected from the animated ones. There's no flow, no build, just fragments stitched together. The animation itself is stiff and lifeless. Characters move awkwardly. Physical comedy loses its impact when timing is off, and here the timing is constantly off. Slaps turn into pauses. Reactions lag. The movement feels delayed rather than punchy. Comedy that once relied on precision now feels padded. The biggest issue is that the Stooges were performers, not concepts. Their humor depended on facial expressions, speed, and physical presence. Animation flattens all of that. What remains is noise without impact. Jokes repeat endlessly. Familiar routines are recycled with less energy each time. Catchphrases are leaned on instead of earned. The show assumes recognition will carry the laughs. It doesn't. Modern viewers feel the disconnect immediately. The humor feels strained. The pacing drags. Scenes stretch long past their purpose. Instead of chaos, you get fatigue. Even the live action segments struggle. They feel staged, restrained, oddly quiet. The spark that once defined the trio is muted. It's nostalgia trying to perform instead of inspire. Watching this now feels like watching a tribute act rehearse instead of perform. You recognize the shape of the comedy, but the soul is missing. This show isn't unwatchable because it's offensive or shocking. It's unwatchable because it misunderstands what made its stars work in the first place. It turns energy into obligation. The New Three Stooges sits at number 1 because it shows the danger of stretching a brand past its limits. When familiarity replaces creativity, animation doesn't age. It stiffens. And nothing feels older than comedy trying to remind you how funny it used to be. So that's the list. 18 cartoons that once owned Saturday mornings and now feel frozen in time. Not because animation failed, but because it was still learning how to move, how to pace, how to trust its audience. Some of these shows live on as memories, others work only in clips, but all of them remind us how far the medium has come. Which one surprised you the most? Which one do you still defend? Drop it in the comments, hit subscribe, and tell me what era of cartoons we should pull apart next.